Hello, hello. Welcome to the Enquiry podcast. This is a show that helps you to influence your reality to the greatest capacity in order to be able to use your life as the medicine that it is, to be able to know how to read the signposts and follow the breadcrumbs in order to express the fullness of who you are and what you're actually here for. I'm your host, Nerida Mills. I am a master psychosomatic practitioner, coach and facilitator, and it is my absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome on board and let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to Enquiry. Last episode, we started speaking into the masculine and feminine energies, and I gave a couple of examples around the perception of men in my life not being reliable and how that reflected back into my own masculine, what that meant for me from the standpoint of what I was able to provide for myself and also how it was actually showing up in my behavior in my business and then the resulting fallout of that, right? It's very interesting. That's just one story, right? One example of how the projections that we have outside of ourselves are actually reflected in and how the source is always from within. Generally, when we have an issue with our masculine or our feminine energies not being at the full capacity of what they're capable of, it often stems from the relationship that we have to our parents in our early years and resulting hurts that come from those relationships or from those dynamics. For me personally, mine was I felt rejected by my dad. And so, no, you reject me, I'm going to reject you. Therefore, I'm going to reject a part of myself because when I reject, particularly with a parent role model, and family constellations is really beautiful work if you're looking to kind of dive into this a little bit more as well. But if I'm rejecting a part of my parent, then you have to understand that our parents inform who we are on so many different levels. And by rejecting that part of them, I reject a part of myself because I am from them, right? I'm literally the culmination, not just from a DNA standpoint, but from a behavioral standpoint, predominantly of my parents. And so it's when we take a behavior and go, I would never do that. It might not even be that conscious, to be fair. Most of the time it's quite unconscious and we just go, there's a decision made at some point that I'm not like that. I don't want to have that around, or I'm disappointed in that. I can't trust that. I've been hurt by that. And therefore I'm going to suppress that in my own life in order to regain that sense of safety again. And of course, what that means is that then we either have a suppressed masculine or a suppressed feminine, depending on the relationships that you had with your parents. And we spend the rest of our life coming back into a state of wholeness, which is beautiful. And this is the life path. I hear a lot of my clients' frustrations around, oh my God, like, why does it have to be this hard? Or why do I have to face this thing? Or I wish it wasn't this way or whatever. But just show me a human being that hasn't gone through this journey and I will be a very surprised person because I haven't found any yet. The pattern that I notice is you come into the world and you're whole and complete and perfect and innocent. And then we go through a process of individuation and separation. And so the individuation and separation is who am I in relationship to others and who am I in relationship to the world and who am I in relationship to life. And then we kind of come into this space of knowing I am a separate individual being as opposed to when you're first born and you're one with everything. Now I am a separate individual being. Well, now there's the comparison piece, right? Now there is the egocentric persona that takes on the responsibility for the events, experiences, and pains of that person's life. And so now we have all of these kind of segmented parts of self that start to develop based on those experiences. And as we go into our teenage years, we start modeling different behavior, start really individuating again, even more. There's a shedding that actually happens in the brain from childlike thinking. And we move into a more maturation, ideally, of the psyche that we're able to start coming back into wholeness again. The coming back into wholeness again generally starts at the end of teenage years where we start kind of looking for completion. But most people don't really kick that journey off until their 30s. And even then, it's quite immature, I guess, in a sense. We want to develop that coming back into wholeness. And what I mean by wholeness is the acceptance of all of our parts, the acceptance of all of who I am. As a child, I learned that maybe my full belly laugh is unacceptable. It's too much for people, so I suppress it down. Or maybe my childlike nature is too much for people, so I suppress it down. Or maybe my anger is too much for people, so I suppress it down. Or maybe my sadness, my tears, my sensitivity, whatever it is too much, and so I suppress it down. And then we get to a point, at whatever point in life you get there, where we start going, hang on a second, I love that part of myself and I miss that part of myself. And we start reclaiming these parts. And the masculine and the feminine energy is much the same in the sense where when we've suppressed one part of it and the other part has had to take on some of the weight that is left to the responsibility of wholeness, and then it becomes fatigued. And our life journey is really coming back into a state of balance and wholeness in the expression of who we are. The medicine in life in this area is really delivered through relationships. Using your relationship as a barometer to what's going on inside, and then using your inside as an influencer for what's going on outside. We can obviously enter into this dynamic either way. So you can come into self and say, well, how am I actually feeling? Well, I'm feeling unsupported. Okay, interesting. How am I supporting myself? The first knee-jerk reaction is often blame because our minds are made up of a 5-year-old child. We're all quite immature, really, but depends on how reactive you are as to if you listen to that or act on that, or if you take a moment and take a deep breath and actually take ownership around it. And again, all stages of development are welcome, but just know that it's a stage of development. What we want to do is we want to look at maturing the way in which we are able to show up. When I first started the work around my masculine and feminine energy, I had initially put a lot of energy and effort into my feminine and I think a lot of women do this on the back end of a relationship that felt quite toxic, is we want to reclaim our femininity. We want to reclaim our power, and the feminine is very powerful, right? We spend a lot of time there. And I certainly did. I spent probably a good 3 or 4 years there before I recognized and was shown that my masculine was actually very, very immature. So my masculine was acting out like and this is when I started really developing this work or developing my understanding around this work that's been around for millennia, is at this point. And what I noticed was that he was like, I was treating him like a troll underneath the bridge. He was rejected. He was a big, nasty beast. He was something not to be looked upon. But also the behaviors that would come from him were very immature. It was more like a tantruming 14-year-old, if that. I have a 12-year-old son at the moment, and I'd probably say he's more mature than what my inner masculine was at this stage. And not going to lie, I was probably 34, 35. What the invitation is at that point is when you start noticing that the behaviors that are coming out in the masculine. How did I know that? Let me unpack it for you a little bit more. How I knew that it was a very immature reaction is if you look at what is the masculine responsible for. Masculine is responsible for creating structure in my life, for going after what I want, being disciplined about that, for reaching my goals. It's also responsible for holding space for me to feel safe and for holding space for my own emotions. Now, at the time, I felt really guilty about having my own emotions, like the fullness of my emotions. I'm a very sensitive person, always have been. And so I always felt like I was too much in that sense. And I would get angry at myself for being sad, which is always helpful. And I couldn't even say the word have it, let alone have one in my life. The structure was not there at all. I was really undisciplined in a lot of respects. My finances were a total mess. I'd pulled myself out of a lot of debt, but I was never able to get further ahead, really. Like I wasn't able to cultivate any form of savings necessarily, even though I was able to make ends meet just. There was a lot of immature things, like not being able to run a balance sheet. Like it's a basic principle, right? It's really not that challenging. You just have to be willing to sit down and actually do the work. And when it came to sitting down and doing the work, my inner masculine would rebel. And what that looks like is get huffy and puffy about it, feel victimized about it. Like, I can't believe I have to do this shit. Like, that sucks. Like, if only whoever was doing something else and I wouldn't have to do this. And the blame game was coming out. And there was just a lot of resistance around it. I would avoid it. I would prefer to sit down and watch a movie rather than do numbers on a spreadsheet. And to be fair, I still don't enjoy numbers on a spreadsheet. It's not like I've now fallen in love with spreadsheets. I haven't. It's not my natural way of working my brain. However, I now have the discipline to know that if I want the outcome, then I need to do the work to get the outcome, right? What we're looking at is, and the way that I like to relate to it is looking at your inner masculine or inner feminine or both in a way of, if I was to give this part of myself an age based on the behaviors that are coming out, what age would I give it? And I'll unpack the feminine in the next episode a little bit more for you guys, because I know I've spoken a lot about masculine. If I was to give this part of myself an age, what age would I give it? And then what are the behavioral traits that really are the difference between this age and, say, a matured expression of that energy? For example, what's the difference between a teenage boy and a man who is, say, 45, 50, who's figured out their life and has created their kingdom and is able to now give back? What's the difference in their behavior? What's the difference in the way that they relate to themselves or to other people? What's the difference in their thinking? And then that's where I'm looking at maturing my masculine. And you'll notice that even between those, a teenager is really quite self-centered, which is right on time for a teenager, but as an adult with a masculine expression, not so much on time. Whereas somebody who's in their mid to late 40s, early 50s, as a man, is actually a lot more contribution focused. They're really looking for, how do I give back? How do I bring meaning to my life? And how am I able to create the structures for other people to flourish? There's a very, very big difference there. Another one to explore into, I know I'm giving you a little bit of homework at the end of some of these episodes, and trust that you're working those through in your day-to-day. And I'd love some feedback around what you're noticing for yourself. Just looking at, off the back of this episode, is really, what age would I give? Let's just start with the masculine and we can play with the feminine next episode. What age would I give my masculine if I'm looking at it based on the standpoint of, how do I relate to my life? How do I go after my goals, my dreams, my vision? How do I show up for myself in creating structures for the things that I actually want? How do I penetrate? And there is the piece around desire there as well. So let's reflect on the age, and please feel free to email me or shoot me a message on any of the platforms. Let me know what your age is and how you would like to mature your masculine. All right, that's it for me. Have a wonderful week, and I look forward to speaking to you all again next week.
So that's it from us. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I would like to really acknowledge you for spending the time to explore what creates your reality and how you can influence it best. If you have absolutely loved this episode and the ones before it, then I highly encourage that you jump onto my newsletter list. You'll be able to find the details of that in the show notes. You can also follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Nerida Mills. Really, really, really looking forward to speaking with you again soon. If you have any comments, insights, feedback, anything that you would like to share from these episodes, please feel free to email me at info@neridamills.com. Until next time.